Welcome back to XRP On Moon, the channel where we break down the biggest, boldest, and most misunderstood developments surrounding XRP and the future of global finance. Today's topic is something that most people are completely overlooking, yet it could redefine how XRP is valued forever: high-price liquidity. Now, I know what you're thinking. In a market where everyone is chasing low entry prices and quick gains, why would a higher price even matter? But what if I told you that for XRP to truly operate at a global institutional level, a higher price might not just be beneficial, it could actually be necessary. And once you understand this shift in perspective, you'll realize why this conversation is starting to gain serious traction among analysts and long-term holders. Let's break this down in a way that connects the dots. The current financial system is built on outdated infrastructure where banks rely on pre-funded accounts across different countries just to move money internationally. This creates massive inefficiencies, capital gets locked up, transactions take time, and costs continue to rise. This is exactly the problem that Ripple is trying to solve through its on-demand liquidity system, where XRP acts as a bridge between two currencies. Instead of holding foreign reserves, institutions can convert their local currency into XRP, send it across borders within seconds, and convert it back into another currency almost instantly. It's fast, cost-effective, and scalable, at least in theory. But here's where things get really interesting. Most retail investors believe that XRP needs to stay cheap in order to be useful. The logic seems simple. The cheaper the asset, the easier it is to use. But that assumption starts to fall apart when you think about the scale of global finance. We're not talking about small transactions here. We're talking about trillions of dollars moving across borders every single day. If XRP were priced at just a few dollars, it would require massive quantities of tokens to facilitate that kind of volume, which introduces inefficiencies, slippage, and increased pressure on liquidity pools. In other words, a low price could actually become a limitation rather than an advantage. Now flip that perspective. Imagine XRP priced significantly higher, where each unit carries far more value. Suddenly, you don't need millions of tokens to move large sums of money. You can do it with far fewer units, making the system more efficient and easier to manage. This is the core idea behind high-priced liquidity. It's not about hype or unrealistic predictions. It's about functionality at scale. Just like how large financial institutions prefer dealing in high-value assets rather than low-denomination units, XRP could follow a similar path if it becomes deeply integrated into the financial system. And this is where the real shift in mindset happens. Instead of viewing XRP as a speculative coin driven by retail traders, you start to see it as a potential piece of global financial infrastructure. In that context, price isn't just a number on a chart. It becomes a reflection of how much value the network is capable of moving efficiently. If the demand for XRP grows due to real-world usage, especially from institutions, then the price may need to adjust to support that demand. Now, does this mean XRP is guaranteed to reach extremely high prices? Not necessarily. There are still many factors at play: regulation, adoption, competition, and overall market conditions. But what it does mean is that the traditional way of thinking about price might not apply here. The idea that XRP must stay cheap to succeed could be one of the biggest misconceptions in the entire space. So as we move forward, keep this question in mind. Are you evaluating XRP based on how crypto markets usually behave, or based on how global financial systems actually operate? Because the answer to that question might completely change how you see XRP's future. As we move deeper into this concept of high-priced liquidity, it's important to understand that this isn't just a theory built on price speculation. It's rooted in how liquidity actually functions within real financial systems. When institutions move money across borders, they don't think in terms of hype or market cycles. They think in terms of efficiency, speed, and minimal friction. This is exactly where Ripple and its on-demand liquidity model come into play, with XRP acting as the bridge that eliminates the need for pre-funded accounts. But for this system to truly scale at a global level, the structure of liquidity itself becomes the most critical factor. And that's where most people underestimate what's actually required. Let's visualize how this works in practice. When a financial institution initiates a cross-border payment using XRP, the process involves converting fiat into XRP, transferring it across the network, and then converting it back into another fiat currency on the receiving end. This entire flow depends on liquidity corridors, which are essentially pathways between two currencies supported by exchanges and market makers. These corridors must have enough depth to handle transactions smoothly without causing major price fluctuations. Now imagine scaling this system up to handle not just millions, but billions or even trillions of dollars daily, the level at which global finance operates. At that scale, the idea of using a low-priced asset starts to create serious challenges. Large transactions would require massive volumes of XRP, increasing the risk of slippage and putting pressure on liquidity providers. Even with advanced systems in place, maintaining stability with such high token volumes becomes inefficient. This is why the concept of high-priced liquidity begins to make more practical sense. If each unit of XRP carries significantly more value, institutions can move large sums using fewer tokens, reducing friction and improving execution speed. It's not about making XRP expensive for the sake of it. It's about optimizing the system for high-capacity value transfer. Now let's talk about the role of market makers, because they are absolutely essential in this equation. Market makers provide the buy and sell orders that keep liquidity flowing within these corridors. In a high-demand environment, they must be able to handle large trades without causing volatility. As institutional adoption increases, these market makers would likely operate with deep capital reserves and algorithmic precision, ensuring that transactions remain seamless even under heavy load. And here's the key insight. As the value flowing through the system increases, the need for stable and efficient liquidity grows alongside it, which naturally supports a higher valuation for the underlying asset. Another layer to consider is confidence. Financial institutions don't just adopt new systems overnight. They require trust, regulatory clarity, and proven performance. Over time, as XRP-based solutions demonstrate reliability and cost efficiency, confidence begins to build. And when confidence increases, capital follows. This is where the dynamic starts to shift from retail-driven speculation to institutional-driven demand. Instead of small investors trading on emotion, you have large entities allocating significant resources based on real-world utility. There's also an ongoing discussion in the XRP community about whether the asset's price has been held back due to regulatory uncertainty and broader market conditions. While opinions vary, one thing is undeniable: clarity changes everything. As legal frameworks evolve and digital assets gain more recognition within traditional finance, barriers to entry begin to fall. This opens the door for a new wave of participation, not just from retail investors, but from banks, payment providers, and even governments. When you combine all of these factors, growing transaction volume, deeper liquidity corridors, institutional-grade market making, and increasing regulatory clarity, you start to see a clear trajectory forming. High-priced liquidity isn't just a possibility. It becomes a logical outcome of a system designed to handle massive value efficiently. So the real takeaway here is this: XRP's future price may not be determined by hype cycles or short-term trends, but by how effectively it integrates into the global financial machine. And if that integration accelerates, the demand for efficient, high-value liquidity could reshape everything we thought we knew about XRP's true potential. As we take this discussion even further, we now arrive at one of the most powerful and often overlooked pieces of the puzzle: the role of central banks and the rise of digital currencies at a national level. Around the world, financial authorities are actively developing what are known as central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. These are not speculative assets like typical cryptocurrencies. They are state-backed digital versions of fiat currencies designed to modernize payment systems, improve transparency, and increase control over monetary policy. But here's where things become extremely interesting. While each country can build its own digital currency, the real challenge lies in how these systems will communicate and transact with each other globally. And this is exactly where XRP begins to stand out in a very unique way. Think about the complexity involved if every country tried to directly integrate its CBDC with every other nation's system. You would end up with a tangled web of connections, inefficiencies, and technical limitations. It simply wouldn't scale effectively. Instead, what many experts suggest is the need for a neutral bridge asset, something that isn't tied to any single country, but can facilitate value transfer between all of them seamlessly. This is where the infrastructure being developed by Ripple becomes highly relevant, as it is specifically designed to enable interoperability between different financial systems using XRP as the bridge. Now let's connect this back to the idea of high-priced liquidity. If XRP were to be used as a bridge between multiple CBDCs, the volume of value flowing through the network could be enormous, potentially reaching into the trillions on a regular basis. At that level, using a low-priced asset becomes increasingly impractical. The system would require vast quantities of XRP to process transactions, which could introduce inefficiencies and increase the risk of instability. On the other hand, a higher-priced XRP allows for greater value transfer with fewer units, making the system far more efficient and scalable at a global level. This is where the narrative begins to shift from speculation to infrastructure. We're no longer just talking about XRP as a cryptocurrency competing in the market. We're talking about its potential role as a core layer in the future of international finance. And when an asset becomes part of infrastructure, its valuation is no longer driven purely by market sentiment. Instead, it starts to reflect the level of dependency the system has on it. Another important factor to consider is the speed and cost efficiency that XRP brings to the table. Traditional cross-border transactions can take days to settle and often involve multiple intermediaries, each adding fees and delays. In contrast, XRP transactions settle in seconds with minimal cost. For central banks and financial institutions, this isn't just a convenience, it's a competitive advantage. The ability to move value instantly across borders could transform trade, remittances, and global commerce as a whole. However, it's important to remain realistic. The integration of XRP into CBDC ecosystems is not guaranteed. There are political, regulatory, and technological challenges that must be addressed before such a system can be fully realized. Different countries may choose different approaches, and some may prefer to develop their own closed systems rather than rely on a shared bridge asset. But even with those uncertainties, the possibility itself is significant. Because if XRP does become part of the solution for cross-border CBDC interoperability, the demand for it could increase dramatically. Not from retail investors, but from entire financial systems operating at scale. And this is exactly why the concept of high-price liquidity continues to gain attention. It aligns with the idea that XRP's value may need to rise in order to support the level of activity required in a globally connected financial network. It's not about unrealistic price targets. It's about creating a system that can handle massive, continuous flows of value efficiently. So as you think about XRP's future, consider this. The biggest opportunity may not lie in short-term price movements, but in its potential to become a foundational piece of a new financial architecture. And if that happens, the way we measure its value today might look completely different in the years ahead. It's time to confront one of the biggest barriers holding people back from fully understanding XRP's potential, and that is misconception driven by surface-level analysis. In the crypto space, narratives spread faster than facts, and once people lock into a certain belief, it becomes very difficult to challenge it. One of the most common arguments you'll hear is that XRP can never reach high valuations because of its large supply. On paper, that argument seems logical. Billions of tokens in circulation should naturally keep the price low. But what most people fail to consider is how utility at scale fundamentally changes valuation models. You see, in traditional crypto thinking, price is often driven by scarcity and hype. But when an asset transitions from speculation to real-world financial utility, the equation changes completely. XRP is not trying to be digital gold or a store of value in the same way as some other assets. Its primary role, especially within the ecosystem built by Ripple, is to act as a bridge for moving value across different currencies and systems. That means its importance isn't based on how rare it is, it's based on how much value it can efficiently transport. Let's break that down in a more practical sense. If XRP is being used to facilitate large-scale financial flows, potentially in the trillions, then the network must be capable of handling that volume without friction. This is where high-price liquidity becomes not just a theory, but a logical requirement. A higher price per unit allows XRP to carry more value in each transaction, reducing the number of tokens needed and increasing overall efficiency. In other words, the system becomes more streamlined, more scalable, and more attractive to institutions that demand precision and reliability. Another major misconception is the idea that XRP would need decades of slow, steady growth to ever reach significantly higher price levels. While gradual growth is certainly one path, history has shown us that markets can reprice assets very quickly when a major shift in fundamentals occurs. This could come in the form of regulatory clarity, large-scale institutional adoption, or even integration into existing financial infrastructure. When those kinds of catalysts align, valuation models can change almost overnight, not because of hype, but because the underlying use case has evolved. There's also the influence of market psychology, which plays a bigger role than most people realize. Many investors anchor their expectations based on current prices, assuming that the future must resemble the present. But in reality, transformative technologies often go through phases where they are misunderstood, undervalued, and even dismissed right before they experience rapid adoption. XRP could be in one of those phases right now, where the majority is still focused on short-term price action while the long-term infrastructure narrative continues to develop in the background. At the same time, it's important to stay grounded and avoid falling into blind optimism. Not every bullish theory will play out exactly as expected, and there are still real challenges that XRP must overcome. Regulatory hurdles, competition from other technologies, and shifting global policies could all impact its trajectory. The key is not to assume certainty certainty, but to understand possibility backed by logic and data. What makes the high-price liquidity concept so powerful is that it forces you to rethink how value is measured in a system designed for global scale efficiency. It challenges the idea that more tokens automatically mean lower prices, and instead shifts the focus toward how effectively those tokens are used within a high-demand environment. As we bring everything together, the concept of high-price liquidity ultimately comes down to one powerful shift in perspective, moving away from seeing XRP as just another tradable crypto asset and starting to view it as a potential core layer in global financial infrastructure. Throughout this discussion, we've explored how efficiency, scalability, and institutional demand could reshape how XRP is valued, especially if it becomes deeply integrated into systems built by players like Ripple. And when you step back and look at the bigger picture, it becomes clear that this isn't just about price predictions. It's about understanding what kind of role XRP is actually aiming to play in the future of money. If XRP succeeds in capturing even a fraction of the global cross-border payments market, the implications are massive. We're talking about a system that moves trillions of dollars, where speed, cost efficiency, and reliability are not optional. They are essential. In that environment, the idea of a low-priced asset handling enormous value starts to break down. Instead, high-priced liquidity becomes a logical evolution, where each unit of XRP carries greater value, allowing the network to operate more efficiently with fewer tokens in motion. This isn't hype. It's a structural requirement if the system is to function at a truly global scale. But with that potential comes a reality check. Markets are not driven by a single narrative. Even if the fundamentals point toward a strong use case, external factors can and will influence the outcome. Regulatory developments, global economic conditions, technological competition, and institutional decision-making all play a role in determining whether XRP reaches its full potential. There will be volatility, there will be uncertainty, and there will be moments where the market doesn't seem to reflect the underlying utility at all. This is why it's so important to approach XRP and the broader crypto market with a balanced mindset. Understanding concepts like high-price liquidity gives you an edge in perspective, but it doesn't eliminate risk. The future of XRP will be shaped by adoption, execution, and real-world integration, not just theories or expectations. And while the opportunity may be significant, it's equally important to remain disciplined, informed, and realistic about what lies ahead. At the same time, one thing cannot be ignored. The financial world is evolving. Traditional systems are being challenged, new technologies are emerging, and the demand for faster, more efficient global transactions is growing every day. In that transformation, assets that can provide real solutions, not just speculation, are the ones that stand to gain the most attention. XRP is positioning itself in that category, and whether it fully succeeds or not, the conversation around it is already pushing people to rethink how value moves across the world. So the real takeaway isn't just about whether XRP will reach a certain price, it's about recognizing that its valuation model may be completely different from what most people are used to. High-priced liquidity isn't a promise, but it is a framework that aligns with how large-scale financial systems operate. And if that framework becomes reality, then the way we look at XRP today could seem incredibly limited compared to what it might represent in the future. This content is for informational and educational purposes only, and should not be considered financial advice. Cryptocurrency investments are highly volatile and involve significant risk. Always conduct your own research and consult with a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decisions. The views expressed in this video are based on analysis and opinions that may change over time, and there are no guarantees of future performance for XRP or any other digital asset.